when we just get too tired to care, and burnout. I know there are a lot of folks on here that have been doing work in law enforcement and the helping professions, healthcare, counseling and advocacy, and it can take its toll. To be realistic, it can take its toll over time. If you come into this work with any ounce of compassion, over time it can take its toll. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about compassion fatigue. It's also known as secondhand shock, secondary stress reaction. It's a type of stress that happens when we help or want to help people who are traumatized or under significant emotional duress or stress. So to understand compassion fatigue, it sometimes is called burnout, sometimes it's all lumped in together, but it's a slightly different concept. Unlike burnout, like I said, compassion fatigue can be treatable, but it might be less predictable. Compassion fatigue, when it happens, can be sudden. Burnout usually emerges over time. So for you long haulers that have been doing this work for a long time, we tend to get burnt out. Sometimes, if we get severely burnt out, we have to change jobs or occupations. I know on those days when I fantasize about rescuing burros and Mustangs or being a barista at Starbucks, that's my signal that I'm getting burnt out. Measures can be taken to prevent or treat compassion fatigue before that change in work environment is required. And realistically, in the work that we do, whether it's healthcare or counseling or law enforcement, sometimes there's a big turnover. And we want to keep folks there in our jobs because there's a lot of people out there that need us. So over time, burnout and compassion fatigue can change our worldview. It transforms or changes our inner experience, the way we look at life. And then, we feel responsible for, we compassionately or empathetically engage with traumatized clients, people going through. Sometimes we work with folks who are having the worst days of their life, the worst times in their life. And some of you may have seen that that's been exacerbated over the past year, particularly. On top of everything else going on, all of the fallout from COVID and the way it's impacted families on every level, and how it's impacted us. So there's a shift in how we view the world, how we view others, and how we sense danger around us. As this little icon says, shift happens. This is really important that I pay attention to my pronunciation on this slide, but it happens. It really changes the way we see things, the way we experience life. So what are some symptoms? This is the time that you do a personal assessment, if you will. Because it can take a physical, a mental, every aspect of our lives, spiritually, emotionally, it can take a toll on us. So you think about, for those of you that have been doing this work for a long time, how you are today, as opposed to when you started 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you're probably different people. In some aspects, you're probably different people because you've developed and grown and learned in your life and your natural development as a human being. In other aspects, you've changed, you're a different person because of the work that you do and the way it's impacted you. And so we don't do any harm to the people that we serve. It's really important that we do an honest assessment of ourselves. So let's talk about what that looks like. So again, Do you experience chronic physical and emotional exhaustion? Do you depersonalize? Do you categorize or label people? You lump them in certain categories. Do you feel like you are better than the people that you're helping, that you are above them, that you are superior to them in some way? Are you irritable? Are you sometimes really tough on yourself? Have feelings of self-contempt because you couldn't do more, should have done better? Are you shooting on yourselves? I should have done this, I shouldn't have done that, I should have said this, I shouldn't have said that. Are you doing those kind of things, really raking yourself over the coals? Do you have difficulty sleeping? Do some of the cases that you work, the people that you interact with, do they linger? You think about them before you try to go to sleep. Are you losing weight or gaining weight at a rate that's unusual for you? Do you have headaches? I know some of us carry our tension and our stress in our shoulders and our neck, and that can result in headaches. Are you just not happy with your job? You know, these in and of themselves might not be directly related to compassion fatigue. It might be related to your work environment, to your boss, to your coworkers, to your pay. But they may be a direct result of compassion fatigue. So it's really important to do an honest assessment of where you're at. So this, I liked this quote and I like this tiger. So think about this. The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. Again, you know, we're human beings. We feel things. Many of us go into this work heart first, wanting to really make a difference in people's lives. And it's going to impact us. It's going to impact us, and that's just the reality of the mission we have chosen. So who's at risk for compassion fatigue? Let's talk about who that will impact. It certainly affects a wide range of professions and caregivers. And it tends to be common among professionals who regularly work in a helping or healing capacity. And I suspect that all of you on here fall in these categories. So for those of you that are mental health professionals, and if you have anything else to add to this list, I welcome that in the chat. But mental health professionals, we hear the stories and see and learn about the experiences of who we meet in therapy in our counseling sessions. And that might start to affect their lives outside of work. A lot of people are in desperate straits, maybe feeling hopeless and helpless. We do close work with people that are experiencing, and we hear stories of abuse, death, trauma. We might have an overwhelming empathy that we give to clients, and many times that leaves us feeling depleted. Regardless of the stories, they start to accumulate in our conscious or subconscious. Think about our current life circumstances. Sometimes our own loss, our own trauma, our other life-altering circumstances that we're going through that takes a toll on us. Sometimes our working conditions, many times are stressful. There might be a lot of workplace negativity because some of our coworkers might be experiencing compassion fatigue and unhappiness. Any mental health folks out there that might want to add to this list? You can ask Lachey or whatever works for you. If anything comes up, just put it in the chat box.
Would you like me to read them, Doreen?
Yes, please, Lachey.
Disruptions in our own parenting, love lives as well, current events,
I do see one up there. Where's the boundary between blowing off steam and gossip, or just really calloused complaining that offends newer people? I think that's a discussion that needs to happen with your team. You know, does it feel or sound like somebody's really burnt out? Are they being cynical? Is that really affecting the workplace environment? And sometimes, you know, that kind of stuff doesn't have any place at the workplace. Sometimes we need to get an outside mentor or somebody to blow off steam with. Because in doing this work, we have to be surrounded with as much positivity as possible to offset the negativity that we're faced with. So, domestic violence advocates. Advocates experience compassion fatigue. Certainly, there's frequent exposure to trauma material. There might be a person's own history of trauma that sometimes is triggered. Listening to people's stories and what's connected to that. Many times the confusion, the betrayal, and somebody that they love can hurt them like they have. Sometimes reading the cases, reading intakes, witnessing violence. Sometimes advocates go to court with folks. There might be aggression from an abusive party if they're in the courtroom or in the courthouse. Working on hotlines, other exposures to violence and people suffering. Witnessing that suffering on a regular basis, and then feeling responsible for someone's safety or well-being might be a regular factor.
Doreen?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to wait to the end of your sentence. There's a question in the Q&A box. It says, how do you, I think, initiate the conversation on burnout as a possible cause affecting performance?
I think I'll just be frank and upfront, because we need to know that if that continues and that person is not working up to their fullest capacity, that could harm the people that they're serving eventually. So we want to start from the beginning in our workplaces. In the interview, the job interview, ask them how they take care of themselves. Ask them how they would know if they were burnt out. Really prioritize staff care and support. And make it an environment where employees know that you prioritize that self-care. And when you get to know each other, you can notice those things in each other. I tend to use archaic biblical kind of language when I'm burnt out. And one of my supervisors in the past brought that to my attention. So, you know, making that list of what I can pay attention to, whether it's mental or actually having it written down is really important. We need to be able to recognize that in ourselves. That's part of our ethical responsibility as helpers, is to know that and prioritize that. I mean, we always give, you know, suggestions to the people that we serve all the time on how they can take care of themselves better. And we need to really walk that talk. We really need to practice that. Being that this is not a big surprise, being that we know that this happens in the helping professions, it needs to be a regular part of our work culture. That was probably a long-winded answer for that question, but thank you very much for it. So sexual violence advocates certainly can experience compassion fatigue, again, exposed to the suffering of others, their own history of trauma, just bearing witness to somebody's victimization, the process that they go through to find safety and healing and justice. listening to the things that they've experienced at the hands of another person, continually offering that support and compassion to others, many times navigating systems that are challenging. Sometimes, some days we don't feel like we have anything to give. We don't want to offer empty platitudes, for instance. Sometimes we just have to be with someone who is in a lot of pain. And sometimes we really feel like we can't change anything, or we don't have the power to make things better. So we might experience some level of hopelessness and helplessness. Okay, so Claire asked, when should you ask for help for yourself? I would say before it gets to the point where you might harm someone that you're working with. I think it's really important that we find out from our workplaces what is in place for us to get support, what our benefits, our HR can provide. Finding someone in your community, whether it's mental health or the domestic or sexual violence community or law enforcement, in the court or legal community, find someone that is familiar with the work that you do and can serve as a mentor or a sounding board. But I think if you know yourself and you monitor yourself and you regularly assess yourself, because that's the most important thing, is that we know ourselves. You'll know when you need to reach out for help. And especially if you hold high that standard of do no harm, that needs to be the compass for us. When I don't feel like I can do my best, when I don't want to go into work, I mean, whatever it is that indicates that you're experiencing some burnout or compassion fatigue. Okay. A lot of good suggestions in the chat. Check it out.
There's another question. It says, is self-care perks ever included into grant proposals?
By golly, I can ask our grant person and find out, but they should be. If they're not, they should be. Those things certainly should be funded. I mean, it's not a big mystery that this happens to those of us in the helping professions. So one would think that our funders would want to support self-care, so we don't have a bunch of people leaving to overwhelm Starbucks. Be baristas, right? We certainly. I'll check with the person that handles our grants here and check that out. But that's a good question. And if you do have an EAP, check it out. Find out what benefits there are for you besides, medical and dental. So people that do healthcare, Lachey, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to ask if you could explain what EAP means for those of us who may not be familiar with that acronym.
Employee Assistance Program. Right? Yeah, Employee Assistance Program. So sometimes they offer counseling, sometimes they offer substance abuse treatment. On some plans, you can get so many sessions of mental health support or counseling. So employee assistance programs, check them out. So hats off. To the healthcare workers. This has been a year. So when you think about that, what folks have been through, I mean, doing healthcare is hard in and of itself. But this past year with the pandemic, it's taken it to the top. Stuff that folks could never have anticipated. So empathy and compassion are expected. They're demanded on a daily basis. Many times dealing with a heavy workload, there are excessive demands of patients. long hours, the critical care work, working with trauma every day. And this past year, a lot of people that weren't trained to do that found themselves in that all hands on deck kind of situation. High mortality rates, particularly this last year. Lack of support to process, for understanding, to talk things through. Unstable management. They might be experiencing stress at home. And I broke this out into these categories because we interact with a lot of other systems, a lot of other agencies. So I think it's really important for us to be aware of what some of our community partners, some of the folks we interact with in other systems may be going through, may be experiencing. So certainly healthcare workers, for those of you on here, thank you very much. Lawyers, even some of the attorneys. I want to start with this bottom point. Believe it or not, a lot of attorneys have a high capacity for empathy, regardless of all the caricatures and stereotypes that you might hear about attorneys. Many times they have to view graphic evidence of traumatic victimizations, especially in a lot of the work that we do, assault, rape, murder, suicides, child abuse, those kind of things. So they deal with those reports of trauma. They're regularly exposed to the human-induced trauma. They're called on to, listen caringly, empathetically to victim stories. Many times they'll read the reports and descriptions of traumatic events. They view crime or accident scenes. Many times they have high caseloads. So it's really important to think about that with our attorney friends. Law enforcement. They many times respond to scenes of heinous crimes. They are charged with trying to bring order to chaos. Many try to restore a sense of safety and security in the presence of violence or catastrophes. There are myriad situations that put them in a position to provide emotional support to persons impacted by crime. So this brings me to the importance of those partnerships for crisis response, for other community partners, so the burden is not just on law enforcement. But they're impacted by the crimes when they respond to calls where there's abused children, victims of violence, victims of robbery, assault, or rape, home invasions, you name it. Many times they're on the front lines to respond to natural disasters and other catastrophic events. And they come in contact with distraught individuals who often respond unpredictably. I think that this really, again, emphasizes the need for collaboration between all of our systems. So no one system bears the burden of all of the elements of the situations that happen in our homes and communities. So caregivers, a lot of caregivers for folks who have a disability or who are elderly. Many times they're family member or friend. So we might be traumatized by that person's suffering and struggles. Many times we're not only taking care of their bodily and physical well-being, but many times we're managing their finances, their medications, preparing meals and cleaning, and then doing our own too, and taking care of our own immediate family on top of that. It's intense, it's intimate, and it's emotional when you provide that kind of care. And when you're watching someone, especially a loved one, decline, that's heartbreaking, that's heart-wrenching. Many times it's hard to detach from that situation. And sometimes there's no way to provide comfort when folks are in that emotional and physical distress. underpaid and under-supported many times. So child welfare workers, what they see, they many times see a child hurt, children that are dead, children that are terribly beaten. They might have their own history of trauma. They have the burden of assessing whether that abuse or neglect has occurred. They have the responsibility of confronting the alleged perpetrator and having to deal with and possibly testify against that perpetrator, should the allegation be determined to be true. We know that they're tasked with very high caseloads and workloads. Many times they feel like the work is never done, like, will it ever end? They're not paid accordingly to what they're providing, the service that they're providing. Many times there's a lack of promotional opportunities within the child welfare system. And they may not feel valued within the agency. Okay, so any of these previous categories, do you have anything to add? Did any thoughts come up for any of you? I'll give you a moment to think about it. So we talked about child welfare workers, caregivers. Yes.
Doreen.
Yes.
Thank you, Lauren, for being so helpful. So just so everyone knows, if you want to send a message to just Doreen or I, you will have to click on Doreen's name so she can see it. If you're okay with everyone seeing your comments, you can just continue to put them in the chat box and make sure it says all panelists and attendees. Just in case you want to make sure that everyone isn't able to see your message. If you want to message me directly, just look for my name, Lachey Brown, and send that message to me.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, that's a good question. What about social workers? Oh, good, Courtney, animal welfare advocates. So, what about social workers? I think a little bit of each of these categories, don't you think? High caseloads, not being paid accordingly. Child welfare, animal welfare. We see things in any of these professions, in any of these systems, that a lot of the general population can't even imagine. I'm sure that a lot of you have gotten questions or comments from people when they find out the kind of work that you do. About how could you do that kind of work? I don't think I could do that kind of work. Any of you ever gotten that?
Doreen, there's a question in the chat I don't want you to miss. I know you asked another question, so I apologize. Someone asked, why do they get paid the least yet experience the most?
That is such a great question. And I think it is the way that we have structured the helping professions. I think in the beginning of the helping professions, it was mostly women that did the work and were expected to be caregivers. We know that there has been, income inequality. Correct, Hindu care work is devalued. Just like law enforcement work is devalued, the work with child welfare, with animal welfare, domestic and sexual violence advocates. When I first started doing this work, I was being paid $5 an hour working in a domestic violence shelter. Comparatively speaking, and not that, Hollywood and the sports world and entertainment business and all those things aren't important. But it seems to me it would benefit our society in a lot of different ways to balance things out a little bit. That we got paid a little bit closer to the quality and type of work that we're doing. But that's a resounding question that has been asked for ages. And you know, the interesting part of it too is that we love this work. We love to be there for people. We love to think that I possibly made a difference in somebody's life today. And you know, that's one of the other conundrums of doing this work. Many of you know that you can't save people, that we're a part of a person's process, one part of a person's process of somebody trying to overcome drug and alcohol addiction, somebody trying to overcome being homeless, someone trying to heal, you know, after a brutal assault, a rape, their partner trying to kill them. We're a part of their process. So we're not always going to see the miracle on our watch, right? So this is really where our faith comes into play, where we have to believe that we made a difference. And I will tell you that being present with someone, listening to someone, being kind and respectful, whether it's a 10-minute phone call or an hour session with someone, you can't help but make a difference. But we don't always see the end result of the work that we do. So faith drives us. And a lot of times we lose our faith that we're making a difference if we're experiencing compassion fatigue or burnout. If we're thinking like, this is never going to get better, I'm not making a difference, it's never going to end. And, you know, it goes back to that starfish story, you know, the kid throwing the starfish back in the ocean and there's like hundreds of them on the beach and somebody says, you know, why are you doing that? These are all going to die. Doesn't make a difference. And the kid said it made a difference for that one as he threw it back in the ocean. So find out where your faith lies in your work. You might need to bolster it a bit. Because you're making a difference when you spend compassionate, present time with people that are suffering. So this is another great quote. Clients and patients will not stop needing help and support. Disasters will continue to arise. Children will get sick, trauma will occur. As helping professionals, we need to continue to explore ways to remain healthy while doing this deeply challenging and rewarding work. And many of you can't imagine doing anything else. But we have to remain healthy by doing this. We have to know when it's getting to us physically, when it's getting to us mentally and emotionally, when it's getting to us spiritually. We need to know ourselves well enough to know when that's happening. So how can compassion fatigue be prevented? So that self-awareness, that self-monitoring, so we can recognize those changes in behavior. We recognize the changes in work. We recognize the changes in our life outside of work. How many of you know when you are experiencing either compassion fatigue and or burnout? How many of you know yourselves well enough to know when your work is starting to get to you? Okay, a couple people have their hands raised. So you want to share either in the chat or how do you know? Are you in touch with yourself?
Somebody said, when I'm mean to the people I love outside of work, yes, but to admit it and seek help, another story. Someone said, oh, thank you, everybody. I'm just having trouble finding them. So care work is essential work. It is feminized and devalued. Our economy is arranged around profit rather than self-sustainment, and jeopardizes our well-being. Usually it takes my supervisor to ask me how I'm doing for me to realize I'm not doing my best. More irritable. I recognize it. I have a difficult time sleeping and thinking about residents and staff. I become very emotional and cry a lot. I start to cry after a meeting when feeling overwhelmed. I go see my supervisor. Dreams.
Good, great responses. Please stay in touch. You feel Carl feels his hands and shoulders clench up. Migraines, not being able to focus. Run down, got ill. Doctor remind you about self-care. Good. Gwen, good doctor. I'm relating to the crying ones and the dreaming ones. That's where mine shows up. Get really emotional over Hallmark commercials, for goodness sakes. Diana isolates and gets defensive. And I was, a couple weeks ago, before I took a couple days off, I was having these dreams, doing good self-care, let myself have a nap on the weekend if I want. But I was waking up from my dreams in a panic, thinking I was late for a meeting, or this other dream. I had 2 dreams in one weekend. 2 dreams in one weekend, and then Monday morning, like 3 in a row. Then Monday morning, I woke up in a panic because I couldn't get into a Zoom meeting, and it was critical that I was in that Zoom meeting. And then that ticked me off. So I decided to take a couple days off and just let it go. And I knew I should have done it sooner. And I made a vow to myself to do it sooner before it gets to that point. Thank you very much, Brian.
Sorry.
Yes.
There are 2 questions in the chat, or in the Q&A box. So the first one, what is the difference from compassion fatigue and being burnt by management / lack of support?
Burnt or burnt out? You got burnt because somebody's not treating you right, or somebody sucks as a supervisor and gives you, crappy job duties. That will certainly add to burnout. Compassion fatigue is directly related many times to the people that we serve and the situations of those people that we serve. It can be compounded if you don't have good supervision, if you don't have a supportive environment. And sometimes with all those factors, compassion fatigue and burnout and the repercussions of an unsafe, unhealthy work environment are all in play. So it's really important to look at each segment of your life and how you're feeling with different people, how you're feeling in your home situation, how you're feeling at your work situation, how you're feeling when you're interacting with the people that you're charged with serving, how you feel when you meet with your supervisor or have a team meeting. Really try to zero in on the source of stress or discomfort. And then talk it through with a trusted friend or mentor and problem solve regarding that. But sometimes it's really hard to sort those things out, but it's really important that we do so we can make the best decisions for ourselves and our careers. Again, back to the importance of being in touch with ourselves and being mindful of what's going on. Was there another question, Lachey?
Yes. So would doubting yourself or not believing yourself be a sign of compassion fatigue? Or would it be because I'm just new to the field of social work and just want to do a good job?
I think doubting ourselves sometimes is normal. I think many times it goes hand in hand with a healthy dose of approaching this work with humility. It's important to know that we don't have all the answers. We don't know what's best for someone else. And that's why it takes so much more energy to be empowering to the people that we serve, to listen, to give them support, to give them resources, but they've got to make the final decision about things. And, you know, that's true whether we're talking about law enforcement, well, we're talking about the legal profession, certainly when we're talking about advocacy and social work. The folks that we serve and interact with ultimately have to make those decisions about their life. Now, a shortcut is for us to take over and tell people what we think they should do. You know, we give them advice based on our own life experience. But that usually doesn't work out well because we're not them, right? So we have to do that compassionate, empowering response in order to be effective. So I think if you're not sure, on one hand, that's a good thing. On the other hand, it might reveal some topics or some issues that you might need more training or do a little bit more research on, get some mentoring in. And, you know, I think another place where we can cut ourselves some slack is we're going to learn and grow in our positions. We're going to learn and grow with experience. But we do want to go into our work as well prepared as we can be, but just know there's going to be a lot of learning on the job. Because, you know, you can learn so much in school and in our colleges and universities, but, you know, the best learning comes from experience. And don't be afraid to tell the people that you're working with. I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll find out. I'll check with my supervisor, or let's look that up, right? Do your job with a healthy dose of humility. I hope that answered your question. Okay. So I think I got stuck at this first blah, 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 blah. Okay. Developing either formal or informal supervisory and mentor relationships within, or I'm going to add outside your work environment. That can help. Depending on the work environment, there might be someone there that can be a support or a mentor. And then, you know, hopefully I'm trusting that you all have good relationships, you know, whether it's your partners or your children, other relatives, friends. But listen to the people that know you. If someone that you know really well, family member, friend, whoever, asks you, are you okay? Stop. Don't just automatically respond and say, yeah, of course I am. Really assess yourself. Am I okay? Or ask them why they're asking. They might have noticed something that you were doing or saying, or the way you were acting that you weren't even aware of. So listen to the people that know you. They might be seeing something, like I said, that you don't even know. Any other questions or comments, Lachey, that we might need to attend to?
Yeah, so some folks said in the chat, I have a hard time taking time off because I feel my caseload will build up while I am gone. It seems to always build up while I am out, and it makes it hard to take time off and have peace about it. And then someone underneath them said, I agree that outside life from work affects you too.
Oh, the caseload that build up when we take time off. I can relate to that. Many times when I come back from vacation, I always say, I'm never going to take any more days off, because it seems like all everybody ever does is email, and I have 500 emails staring me in the face that I have to manage when I come back. But I get that. Again, it goes back to making arrangements for those cases to be managed. It comes back to how our workplaces are structured. It comes back to recognizing that we need to take that time off to recharge our batteries, to clear some space in our brain and in our emotional self so we can go back there and provide good services. And as hard as it is, we need to do that because the caseload is going to be there. And that pile up that can happen when we're not in a good place can be crushing. So it's imperative that we take care of ourselves. So some other practices to help prevent compassion fatigue. We really have to reduce stressful workloads if at all possible. Don't be afraid to say this is too much. Be a part of finding solutions in your organization. It's really important to monitor your sleep patterns. Are you getting enough sleep at night? Are you creating a space where you can fall asleep easily? Are you taking regular vacations or staycays? Just time off. Staying at home, maybe doing a project, but time off. Do you do any kind of meditation or journaling or running or yoga or any kind of movement therapy? And as hard as it may be for some of us, you know who you are. Getting therapy is okay. Our emotional health and our mental health and our physical health are all connected. And I know a lot of us have been brought up, whether it's men or whether it's educated people, or we've been brought up to not admit that we need help. But we're human beings. It's normal. In the face of all that we've seen and experienced, it's normal to process and need help processing challenges in our life. It really is normal. There's so much messaging going on about being strong and sucking it up and, that doesn't bother me, blah, 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 but it does. We're human beings. We care, and it gets to us after a while. Therapy, just like any other way that we take care of ourselves, is critical, and it's necessary, and it's okay. And we need to create cultures where it's okay to reach out for support or help. And a lot of us, think we're superheroes or supermen and women, super people, but we're human. Bottom line, we're human. So how is compassion fatigue treated? Sometimes getting that professional support from a mental health clinician, helping us overcome those difficult thoughts and emotions, and really focus on healthy coping mechanisms. And it can be really simple stuff. It could be because of our own personal trauma that maybe something triggered it. And we thought we were, quote unquote, over it. And there it is looking at us in the face again. But that's what clinicians, mental health clinicians are there for, to help us through this stuff. And they're not going to give us the answer. It's, usually not fixed in 1 or 2 sessions, but they'll help us find the answers we need. They'll help us develop the coping mechanisms we need. So again, talking about it with a trusted person or mental health professional, learning about it, how it affects people, making a commitment to regularly exercise. And again, this doesn't mean some big old gym membership or, turning your garage into a home gym. Whatever exercise works for you, whatever movement works for you. If you've got an upstairs, downstairs kind of house, Find an excuse to go up and down the stairs one more time a day. If you've got a pet or dog, some of you have cats. I don't know if you've ever tried to take your cats on walks, which seems impossible. But if you have a dog, for instance, take your dog for an extra walk a day or a longer walk a day. If you know, you and your kids have skateboards or bikes or something, you know, take a ride around the neighborhood and do it while it's still cool enough to do it. You know, getting restful sleep, a healthy diet, you know, add a couple more servings of fruits or vegetables a day, or make a commitment to drink 12 or 16 more ounces of water a day, something small as a starting place. Something small can make such a big difference. You know, making sure that the TV is off if you have one in your bedroom, that there's no bright lights, that it's quiet. I have one of those scented oil diffusers. It's got a soft whirring sound. It has soft changing lights on it. You can put a couple drops of your favorite oil in it. I start that before I go to sleep. I watch the 5 colors cycle through a couple of times, and usually I'm out. Hobbies different from work, positive coping strategies. Sometimes those coping strategies is, you know, really sorting out what's my responsibility and what's not. And sometimes there's support groups and networks for different professional people. Find those out. Find out what's available. So our physical wellness specifically, we've got to be in good shape, and that's going to vary from person to person. Forget about the way people are depicted in all the health magazines. Forget about that. But just, you know, what's the best possible shape for you. So again, it goes back to eating well or eating better, getting restful sleep and exercise. And if we take the time to go grocery shopping, planning our meals each day, you know, making your lunch so you don't, you know, grab something at a fast food restaurant all the time. It'll help your health and your pocketbook. Don't obsessively count calories, but look at things that are a little bit more healthy. Use restraint from reaching for the pleasure of choice. Mine is potato chips. So I got veggie chips this weekend instead because I didn't use a lot of restraint, but I used some restraint. So I tried to pick a healthier chip. So like I said earlier, walking, go up and down the stairs in your house, walk in place, stretch, some kind of movement, some simple kind of thing that's going to get your system and your blood flowing, the oxygen going where it needs to go, etc. Your emotional wellness. Sometimes it's a good idea to limit watching news or reading newspapers, looking at different social media sites. Sometimes those are very distressing. It's important to have supportive people in our lives. Read something for pleasure. I bet a lot of you have work-related or topic-related stuff at your fingertips. Find something to read or watch just for pleasure. Find ways to play. Find ways that you can play in your life. You know, whether it's, you know, catch with your kid or blowing bubbles or, you know, teaching your dog a new skill or a trick. Play. Find a way to play. Listen to music. Find music. Rediscover music. Your social wellness. So especially in this past year, I think we've appreciated technology to a degree, although I've heard that Zoom burnout is very real. But we can stay connected. On the other side of that, we can stay connected to people, especially if we've been social distancing from family or we have family out of state or out of country. We can still connect with them. We need that interaction with our friends and family and people that are important to us in our lives. Do you like growing stuff, vegetables, flowers, whatever? It's important sometimes to connect with our work colleagues. Many of us have been working remotely and don't have that team gathering like we used to. So it's important to try to replicate that. When miss relatives, set up a Skype session or a FaceTime call, or have someone help them with technology. Reconnect with your friends. Connect with the people that you care about and who care about you. Spiritual wellness. So again, sometimes we have crisis of faith. For many of us, our faith helps us get through this work and its challenges. But when we talk about faith and spirituality, it's the life we live inside ourselves versus the life we live outside ourselves through work, through play, through family. Spirituality certainly can be obtained through religious practice, but it's much broader. That practice is much broader. It really involves learning how to be more forgiving, how to be more grateful and compassionate, and to be kinder and less judgmental, especially towards oneself. And in all of our faith communities, these are bottom line concepts in our faiths. Forgiveness, being grateful and compassionate, be kinder and less judgmental, especially towards ourselves. When we're talking about compassion, fatigue, and burnout, many times we are the roughest on ourselves. So our occupational wellness, some of us are in a position that we need to rethink or reconsider our job. And it's always a good time to think about how you spend your time. And outside of our home life, work is where we spend the next greatest amount of time. We need to constantly do assessments. Is this right for me? Do I want to continue this? Do I need to change my professional course? I mean, it's how we spend our lives. Are we spending our lives in a way that promote wellness, happiness for ourselves and our loved ones? Are there ways you can better your opportunities at work? Are there helpful books to offer new ideas on how to increase productivity or to hone your skills? And really think about that. Many of our jobs have opportunities for continuing education. Really look at what you need to be more proficient in your job, to feel more secure or confident in your job skills. And take advantage of the continuing education that many of our jobs offer, but look for those things specifically that you've identified would help you be a better service provider. And really importantly, to think broadly and creatively about that. Some of you are good on the skill part, but are challenged on the organizational or time management part. Look at all aspects of your job and what might be helpful to your job satisfaction, to you feeling like a productive employee in your organization. So environmental wellness. Look around your environment, inside and out. For those of us that have been working from home a lot, some of us have really spent time making a workspace that's conducive to us being able to pay attention, to have quiet time, to have privacy. Some of us have to worry about confidentiality with the people that we serve. So can we make those surroundings more pleasant, safer, and more environmentally sound? Sometimes, many of us, when we work from home, we realized, ooh, I need to declutter. I need to get rid of some of this stuff. Where did this stuff come from? A lot of our organizations have tried to go paperless, to go green. We're using our technology better, so we don't need as much paper. Some of us have a lot of old magazines and articles that we might have read, we don't need anymore. Get rid of them. Sometimes it's helpful to eat outside, to look at our surroundings, to enjoy what's out there. What do you do when you get outside? Do you have plants, flowers, hummingbird feeders? I do. Do you walk through the neighborhood and pick up trash? That's one of the things that I do in my townhome community. But what do you do outside? Do you get some fresh air? Do you, when you're walking at night, look at the stars and the moon? Look at your environment. It's part of finding that balance in our lives. And I will tell you, as people in the service sector, the caring sector, one of the things that we always strive for, or will strive for, is to find that balance in our work lives, in our personal life, in our life all around. Finding balance. So you're not always consumed by work. So you have a life outside of your family life where you can use your skills and your education and your compassion. But we need to find the balance. So this person, L.R. Nost, and this is a good organization to check out, goodtherapy.org. I love this quote: taking care of myself doesn't mean me first, it means me too. A lot of us have been brought up to be very generous with our time and attention, but we're at the bottom of the list as far as time and attention. You have to include yourself in caregiving. You have to include yourself in empowerment and compassionate response. So this is another quote from this person. Again, he's written some great stuff. I would encourage you to check it out. So think about this. Life is amazing, and then it's awful. And then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and the awful, it's ordinary and mundane and routine. Breathe in the amazing, hold on through the awful, and relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just living heartbreaking, soul healing, amazing, awful, ordinary life, and it's breathtakingly beautiful. We need to be there for all of it. and recognize the shifts, recognize the patterns, take a breath when it's mundane and ordinary, and rejuvenate and recharge for when it gets challenging and awful. And recharge to the point where it's beautiful and amazing and there's joy. It's all part and parcel. We can't pick just the parts that we like. We've got to be solid and be there for it all. So here's some references. I think we're going to end up a little early so we can open it up for some conversation and questions and back and forth if you'd like. But these are references for a lot of the material in this presentation. Oh, and another horsey. Thank you, Lachey. So you want to talk about this, then we can open it up for questions or comments and see where it goes. Talk about the evaluation, Lachey.